Newsroom. The week began with the head of the Arab League claiming that the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad could collapse, quote, any time. This as Damascus experiences some of its heaviest fighting yet, enough to force the cancellation of international flights. State television reports that this Wednesday's casualties include 29 ninth grade students and a teacher, victims of a mortar attack on their school. The fighting so intense it's forced the withdrawal of most UN personnel. There are other tangible signs of a turning point. The increased use of ground-to-air missiles, last week's mysterious two-day internet blackout, and a ratcheting of the rhetoric against alleged chemical weapons stockpiles. This as Turkey gets the green light from NATO to deploy Patriot missiles at the border. When the West calls chemical weapons a red line, what does that really mean? Where does Russia stand? Its foreign minister invited by NATO to Brussels. More broadly, what are Assad's options? Remember, his imminent downfall has been predicted before. Today in the France 24 debate, is it really no exit for Assad? And we'll be talking about it with us from Washington, the former U.S. ambassador to both Iraq and Turkey, James Jeffrey with the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thank you for being with us. From Istanbul, Murat Yetkin, editor-in-chief of Turkish newspaper Hurriyet Daily News. And here in the studio, Rahaf Harfoush, editorial director of a new news website, SyriaDeeply.org. Welcome. And welcome as well to Oleg Koptsev, who teaches at the American University of Paris, the France 24 debate, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter. Our hashtag is debate. Let's begin, though, with the words of the U.S. Secretary of State ahead of that NATO meeting in Brussels. Hillary Clinton warning the Syrian president about chemical weapons.
There's a line between even the horrors that they have already inflicted on the Syrian people and moving to what would be an internationally condemned step of utilizing their chemical weapons.
James Jeffrey, isn't that a bit of a slip of the tongue? I mean, what is the difference between being killed by a conventional or a chemical weapon?
Well, there is a real fear of chemical weapons being used not only against the civilian population. There are international agreements against this, including signed by the Syrians, and there are great moral concerns that we have and that the civilized world has against the use of chemical weapons. We saw that when Saddam used it during the Iran-Iraq war and then against his own people. And this puts the international community under tremendous pressure to stand up and to say no. The other fear, of course, is that chemical weapons in a chaotic situation, and Syria is increasingly in a chaotic situation, could fall into the hands of one or another terrorist group where they could be used as mass casualties in a terrorist attack anywhere in the world.
Rahaf Harfoush, your thoughts on what Hillary Clinton said? Because there was some strong reactions from some of my colleagues from the Arabic language channel when they heard why chemical weapons? Why is that the red line?
I think as much as we heard before, I think it sort of crosses a line in terms of the impact of the potential usage of such weapons. I think it puts them more at risk. The conflict then threatens to sort of expand beyond borders and go into different countries, particularly if they fall into the hands of terrorists. I do think, however, that this is the second time, I think, that the U.S. has mentioned the use of chemical weapons. And so it's interesting to note the intelligence that they're receiving in terms of it sort of sheds light on potentially Assad's state of mind as well. I mean, we're seeing a regime that is, for all intents and purposes, crumbling. And if that's the case, then he's got his back against the wall. And I think everyone is reiterating this point just to let him know in case he seems to have missed that point. But, you know, sometimes when people are in that zone where they feel like they have no other options, I think that's just a reminder to him that his actions will have consequences.
Murat Yetkin, do you share that point of view, that this warning about chemical weapons is more looking at Assad as in an increasingly desperate situation?
Well, that warning surely helped, I believe, NATO to make this decision of today to approve Turkey's demand for anti-missile batteries, US-made Patriot batteries. But it's a known fact that Syria has these chemical weapons. It's not a secret. It didn't make much echo in Turkish system, in Turkish public opinion, whether it's chemical weapons or other kind of weapons killing people. Tens and thousands of people are killed by the Assad regime, actually, during the civil war in Syria since more than nearly 2 years now. A particular stress on chemical weapons did not ring too many bells in Turkey in that sense.
Oleg Koptsev, we heard chemical weapons even mentioned in the U.S. presidential debates. It's not something new. Why is it coming to a head now?
Because the rumors might be true. We have to be careful because we also remember the whole scare of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But we also have to remember that Saddam Hussein did use chemical weapons immediately after the first Gulf War. And there's a level of atrocity here that you reach if you use chemical weapons, because you're not just targeting combatants with collateral effects, with collateral damage, but in this case, when you use chemical weapons, it's like using nukes. You destroy entire villages, entire cities with men, women, children, everybody living within the perimeter of the use of these weapons. So we know in advance that the level of atrocity will be particularly excessive. And this also symbolizes the spillover effect. What you said very well is that practically, indeed, there are fumes that could simply cross the border. But it also symbolizes the whole geopolitical and geostrategic situation, in as much as countries surrounding Syria will necessarily be affected by the interior problems of Syria. It's not just a civil war. You have what you call the spillover effect, with tens of thousands of refugees crossing the border. So even if Turkey had wanted to remain completely neutral, it would have been necessarily involved. It's like we see what happens in African countries, or near Syria. We saw what happened when you had Palestinian refugees crossing over into Jordan. It immediately destabilizes countries. So this could destabilize Lebanon. It could destabilize Turkey. And it's only natural that Turkey wants to protect itself.
The warnings about chemical weapons prompting a rebuttal that came this Tuesday from Syrian television.
Syria has stressed repeatedly to the American side, as well as the Russians and the Secretary General of the United Nations, that it will not use chemical weapons if they were available under any circumstances against its people. And the country is fighting and struggling alongside its people against al-Qaeda-sponsored terrorism, which is being supported by prominent nations under the leadership of the United States itself.
Now, over at NATO headquarters, the Secretary General has been giving a press conference. He stands firmly by what he says, and he said that basically with the approval of sending those Patriot missiles, NATO has Turkey's back.
To the Turkish people, we say, we are determined to defend you and your territory. To anyone who would want to attack Turkey, we say, don't even think about it.
James Jeffrey, again, is there concrete evidence that Syria is about to use chemical weapons?
Well, there are three indications. First of all, there are some intelligence indications that the binary elements of, say, sarin or other dangerous chemical weapons have been mixed together, which is a preliminary step to actually deploying them in bombs or artillery pieces. There is that. Secondly, there is the increasing desperation of the regime in its willingness to inflict mass casualties on the civilians. Thirdly, there is the very central role of Quds Force leaders such as Qasem Soleimani in advising the Syrian government. And we know about these people from our experience in Iraq. They will stop at nothing to come after you.
According to whom the mixing of these chemicals?
This is based upon intelligence reports that have seeped into the press here in the United States.
Intelligence reports, U.S. intelligence reports.
Intelligence reports that the U.S. has access to, whether they originated with the U.S. or not, is something that we can't see from the outside looking in.
And let me put the question to you, Murat Yetkin. When you look at the situation at the border, bringing those Patriot missiles, will it help in terms of, as the head of NATO says, act as a deterrent and help I forget his words, de-dramatize the situation there? De-escalate.
Well, it's definitely a relief for Turkish government and Turkish people, because as Rasmussen said in Brussels, Turkey doesn't feel itself alone in this game, and for some time Ankara has been trying to underline that the Syrian crisis, the civil war, which tends to split over to the region, is not something between Turkey and Syria alone. So to have this approval from NATO will definitely make Ankara, make Turkish government and people feel that it's a part of, well, it endorsed the feeling that it's a part of the international system, and any bad feeling to attack Turkey by Assad regime, perhaps because of desperation or any other reason, will have its answer. And I want to make one point clear that yesterday the remark of Russian President Vladimir Putin here in Istanbul following his meeting with Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan, and saying that Russia is not an advocate of Syrian regime, helped the overall situation a lot, because Putin in a press conference also said that every country has the right to defend itself when it's attacked from outside. And that is the situation Turkey faced. And Turkey had lost some lives of its citizens because of fire opened, shelling from Syria. So the situation, the NATO approval helped Turkish people to calm down. Of course, it's a destabilizing factor. It's a stabilizing factor of the crisis.
All right, let's pick up on what you're saying there about the statement on Monday of Vladimir Putin in the company of the Turkish Prime Minister, distancing itself, at least in words, from the regime in Damascus. And yet, Tuesday at NATO, the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, saying, "We're concerned the conflict is being increasingly militarized." About the use of chemical weapons, Lavrov said it's not the first time there's such, quote, rumors and leaks, and they should not be overstated. So we're getting the sense that from Moscow, we're always getting these sort of conflicting signals.
Well, as I said earlier, there has been false information circulating. We remember the whole propaganda about weapons of mass destruction that even Colin Powell believed in himself, realizing later that it was entire false. So, of course, we have to be careful with this kind of information. Nevertheless, I should add that it would be the use of such weapons, of chemical weapons, would be consistent with, indeed, the desperation of the regime, as was said, and the extremism of the regime that absolutely seems not to seek the slightest compromise, and the type of regime, which is very dictatorial.
Which way is Moscow going?
So Moscow,
on the one hand, they're making these statements, and the prime minister in Paris last week, same thing, distancing himself from Damascus. On the other hand, they recently sent in a plane load of new treasury bills.
Well, you said it very well. On one hand, on the other hand, they have to play very carefully on two plans, because on one hand, Syria is the last ally of Russia in the Mediterranean, south of the Black Sea. But in the Black Sea, Russia and Turkey, for the past decades, have become closer and closer. There was a great chance of a historical rapprochement between Ankara and Moscow. Turkey not being accepted in the EU was becoming a potential ally maybe not ally, but a potential new partner for Russia and even Tehran. The Syrian situation is messing this up completely. And Russia is losing this opportunity to get closer with Turkey because of the Syrian situation and because indeed Turkey is threatened by Syria. Now, the Russians will also say what you'll hear a lot from the Russians, and we've heard this with you remember, about a year ago with a representative of Russian interests abroad. Turkey has involved itself. Turkey is a foreign intervention in Syrian affairs in as much as Turkey supported the rebels from the start. On the other hand, we have to remember also that Syria has been an uncontrollable element in the region that has been destabilizing Turkey for decades. They have been supporting, for example, the PKK. They have been supporting Armenian, very marginal Armenian terrorist groups in the past. So it is a very uncontrollable element. In a way, Syria is for Russia what Saddam Hussein was for the Americans when Saddam Hussein was still on the American side. So that is why Russia is extremely embarrassed in this situation and trying to play on two planes. Let's not forget also that there were semi-secret meetings of the Syrian opposition and Kremlin representatives in Moscow about a year ago.
Those meetings about a year ago, there was the point brought up, and it was brought up quite often, James Jeffrey, that the way to solve this and the way to find more of a consensus would be to bring all the parties into the fray. Sources telling France 24 that one of the options that Lakhdar Brahimi, the special envoy, is considering is to propose a deal whereby everyone sits down at the table again in Geneva, including the Russians and including Iran. Would the U.S. go along with that, James Jeffrey?
I think so.
The U.S. has been reluctant in the past to go along with the Iranians sitting down and participating as an outside country in these negotiations, and I'm sure we would maintain that. First of all, Iran is not a neighboring state of Syria. It doesn't suffer the consequences of chemical weapons that slip out of control, of al-Qaeda elements running amok, or of fighting spilling over like Turkey. So the question is, why should Iran be allowed to sit down at the table? They're a major player because they've decided to support the Assad regime in its war against the civilian population of Syria. That should not earn one a seat at the table.
And so you think that it would be a bad idea to sit down with Iran at a meeting in Geneva?
I personally wouldn't recommend it's a bad idea. Russia's a different story. It's a UN Security Council state.
All right, very briefly, because we're about to go to the break.
The West supported Iraq against Iran during the Iraqi-Iranian war. So that involves them, because Iraq then is a neighbor of Syria and Turkey.
All right, when we come back, we're going to pick up on this point and also look at the pressure within Syria, and it's mounting. Stay with us. This is the France 24 debate.